Welcome to the Rediscovery channel. This is the channel where every week I, Ivor Kovac, and my good friend Stilgar take turns coming up with topics from history that the other person doesn't know about and quite often hasn't heard about either. Today is my turn, and I'm going to ask Stilgar, have you heard of Anglo Indians before?
Anglo Indians. Are
Anglo
they the English people that are mixed with the Indian people, I guess, during the colonial times?
Um, yeah, that's close to it, pretty much. There actually is an official definition that the Indian government has made, of what constitutes an Anglo-Indian. But first, I want to say that this video was a request by my wife, and she is actually, I think I told you before that my wife is an Anglo-Indian. She's part of this community. At any rate, yes, the Anglo-Indians are a result of the English colonial presence in India. And when this term was when it originally came into parlance, it was used to describe people that were fully English, but they were born in India. So originally that's what it would refer to. And like Rudyard Kipling, he's an example of one of those kind of people by the original definition. And then today, quite often, it's incorrectly used, especially on the internet. It's incorrectly used to refer to people who are just a mix of Indian and English, because there's actually, like, I wouldn't say like a terrible lot, but you'll find there's a significant Indian presence in England today, and they are marrying and having children with each other. And you can see people posting wedding pictures like, oh, it's my Anglo-Indian wedding, like, because I'm Indian and my husband's English. No, that's not Anglo-Indian according to the definition. But people are using it incorrectly, and you'll see it if you just do a search for Anglo-Indian. So according to the Government of India, the Government of India Act of 1935, an Anglo-Indian is, and I quote here, a person whose father or any of whose other male progenitors in the male line is or was of European descent, but who is a native of India. So you have to have a European last name, and that name, your ancestor or that name has to have come during the English colonial period. So like if an English person goes to India today and has kids, they're not considered Anglo-Indians because the colonial period is over. So they're officially recognized as a minority by the Indian Constitution. So basically, an English person, you got to have an English or other European last name, because some of the Anglo-Indians, they have like Irish names. And in the case of my wife's family, I'm not going to say what their name was, but is actually a Portuguese name, but they're considered Anglo-Indians because the Portuguese ancestor first immigrated to England and had children there, and then those children later went to India as colonists. So that's how. Some might also have Scottish names, but it's the affiliation with the English colonial period that counts. Like if you came over as an English colonist, left behind your name in the gene pool, then those people are Anglo-Indians. So we've talked about the English colonization of India before, but just for the sake of reference, I want to go over the time period again. So the East India Company is present in India from 1608 to 1874. And present, they're there and they're operating, but not necessarily in control during that whole period. So if anybody wants more details on that, check out our video about how the English took over India. I've seen it, there's this opinion that the East India Company comes to be in charge, like they're officially the rulers of India, in 1757, following the surrender of the Nawab of Bengal after the Battle of Plassey. Yeah. So 1757 is when that happens. And then in 1857, there's the Sepoy Mutiny, or also known as the Indian Revolt. And during that time, the English government decides that, we should be in charge of India and not this corporation because they're bungling things up. So the English government takes direct control, and they kind of remove the company, and then the English government rules up until 1947. So it's a pretty long period from when the English come in to when they go. So 1608 to 1947. And that's the time period that the Anglo-Indian community was created. Okay, so let's go into the details about how they get started. So during the colonial period, there's a lot of men that go from England and also Ireland and Scotland as part of the East India Company. They go to India, and those colonists are overwhelmingly male. And service in the East India Company is over 20 years long before you get to go back to Europe. So if you're a 20-year-old guy or a 30-year-old guy and you're single and you got to be there for 20 years, what are you going to do? Well, obviously, if you want female companionship, you're going to have to acquire it where you can. So the Anglo Indians, they start to appear in India after 1639, when the East India Company establishes a settlement in Madras, which I think today, I'm not completely sure, but I'm mostly sure, Madras is actually called Chennai today. So this would be in Tamil Nadu, if that's the case. I'm fairly certain of that, but not completely certain. So just as a, just for context, usually what happens when you have somebody who is fully European and they have a child with Indians, then quite often, if not most of the time, at least about half the time, the children have a European color scheme. They'll have light skin and sometimes also like eyes and hair, like light colored eyes and hair. So why do I say that? Well, the point is that when the English were doing this, it was not a matter that could be hidden. Like everybody's going to know where those kids are coming from and who's responsible for it. And at this time, the Indian culture, even today as well, attaches a lot of shame to having children outside of wedlock. And the English culture used to be like that as well, but I think today they no longer are. But of course, you're closer to them than I, so you would be in a position to know more about their current habits. So that's what it was. It's obvious where these kids are coming from, who is responsible. And so the East India Company, as a result of all this, it encourages its men to marry the local women because they want to avoid scandals. Because, of course, like we talked about in the other video, when the English first come, they don't come in strength. They're just a small presence. And they really have to not offend the Mughals and I guess also the other, like the South Indian groups, the Tamils and such. They have to make sure they don't offend them too much because they're not in the position of strength. They want to keep doing business there. So I've got a quote here, and this quote I actually took from Wikipedia, which normally I wouldn't do. So you can take it with a grain of salt. I couldn't access the original source for this one, but basically it says that in 1688, the board of directors for the East India Company, they made this declaration to the council at Fort St. George. And what they said is, induce by all means you can invent our soldiers to marry with native women, because it will be impossible to get ordinary young women, as we have before directed, to pay their own passage, although gentlewomen sufficient do offer themselves. So what I get from that is that there were women that were interested to go to India, young and single women, but they didn't want to pay for the trip themselves. They wanted the company to pay for it. So the company is saying, let's just have our guys marry local women instead, and that would keep them out of trouble.
Save some money.
Yeah. And actually, that's one of the things, some of the sources I looked at, they did a comparison in terms of upkeep. Like if you're a single guy, not single, but like married or cohabitating, and you're over in India, the upkeep for an Indian woman is a lot lower than it would be for an English woman. So a lot of the guys, they would rather just save the money and be with an Indian woman instead. And actually, I'm kind of that way too. So,
they're probably better looking too.
Yeah, maybe. That depends on what you like and what you can, what you can get. But actually, in the 1780s, 1/3 of Englishmen posted to India left their position to one or more Indian wives and to the children of mixed marriages. So some of these guys, they would just cohabitate with a woman over there, but they wouldn't make it formal. And then when they died, they would leave it in their will, like, hey, give her and the kids my stuff. And some of these guys took up the practice of polygamy while they were there, which I'm guessing was illegal in England at the time, or even if it wasn't, it was definitely not something that was done. It's something that's frowned upon in most European societies, Like in the United States, we actually had laws that were kind of in reaction to the Mormons, where they made polygamy illegal. But of course, there were no such laws in India. So some of these guys were taking advantage of the situation to do things that they otherwise would not be able to. So the early mixing, for the most part, was between people that were like high status English guys and high status Indians. But by the late 1800s and early 1900s, you had a lot more lower class English guys that began to mix with lower class Indians. And according to some of my sources, that's when the English government started to kind of stigmatize this mixing. And so let's see here. I've got
according to your sources.
Yeah. We'll get Yeah, well, the English society was very much a class-oriented culture.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're at this social economic status, you got to act this way and do this and that. And then Indians are kind of like that too, actually. And in their case, you have Hinduism, where it actually formalizes class distinctions to some degree. So they both had at this time, they both had very strong senses of propriety and class expectations, and also very strong shaming culture. So, and I've got this here, 1 in 3, going based on the wills. So between 1780 and 1785, 1 in 3 of the wills left stuff to an Indian family, wife and children, or multiple wives in some cases. And between 1805 and 1810, it's 1 in 4. And then by 1830, it's 1 in 6. And by the middle of this century, it's almost never. And when the English government took over from the East India Company, they tried to put a stop to English people marrying with Indians. So, which I'm coming to that. What I want to do now is mention some examples of high-ranking English officials that went native. So there's this guy, Sir David Octello, who lived from 1758 to 1855. And he was actually not born in England, but born in Massachusetts. And the reason he's part of the East India Company is because United States doesn't get its independence until 1776. So basically, he's going from one English colony to another. And his father was Scottish. While this guy was in India, he adopted the Mughal lifestyle, and he started dressing like the Mughals. He also married 13 wives, all of which were Muslims. And then he used to ride around Delhi in the evening with each of his wives following behind him on a different elephant. So he had like an elephant for each wife, and they would follow him through the city. Like he's showing off it, like that I'm rich and I got all these women. There's nothing you can do, I guess. But he was appointed as the British resident, which is a representative of the English government. So what a representative to have, right? And then the next guy that I want to mention, James Achilles Kirkpatrick. He lived from 1764 to 1805. This guy was actually born in India, but he was fully English. However, he actually spoke Tamil as his first language, and he was fluent in English and some other Indian languages as well. So he was appointed resident to Hyderabad, and Hyderabad, by the way, is a place that I've been to. So he was born in India, appointed resident to Hyderabad, dressed in Mughal-style clothing, and he smoked hookah. And this guy married a very important, high-status Muslim princess named Khair-un-Nisa, who was 14 at the time that they got married. And supposedly, she was an actual descendant of Muhammad. And the marriage was disapproved of by the Mughals and also by the English. And neither the Mughals nor the English were willing to recognize his wedding to this person. And he may have converted to Islam. It's not known, but it seems likely because of she did not change her religion. So Muslim women, they're not allowed to marry infidels. If you want to marry a Muslim, you're supposed to convert. So it's possible.
As if you're a man, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, no. Yeah, so you're not allowed to marry a Muslim woman, but a Muslim man is allowed to marry a non-Muslim woman. Yeah.
That's part of
But
it.
then the kids are automatically Muslim, but that's a different story. Yeah.
Yeah. So he offended everybody, and also it looks like he may have fooled around with her and impregnated her before they got married. And then, of course, when they got married, neither group wants to recognize their wedding. And he has 2 children with her. And I did find a painting of their 2 children when they were young. I'll put in the slideshow. And basically, both of their kids, they look physically, they appear to be fully European. And so what this guy does is he sends his kids to England to be educated, and they're actually baptized and converted to Christianity. So that's one thing that happens with a lot of these early Anglo-Indians is their fate, their physical appearance was a factor in their fate. So I have another quote here. This is from a Calcutta agent to Warren Hastings, who was the Governor General of India. And this is about 2 of his, this letter concerns some of his grandchildren, or it's step-grandchildren, actually. But basically, they were Anglo-Indians, product of a mixed marriage. So what the agent says, and this is an English agent stationed in Calcutta, and he says, the 2 eldest, who are almost as fair as European children, should be sent to Europe. I could have made no distinction between the children if the youngest was of a complexion that could possibly escape detection. But as I daily see the injurious consequences resulting from bringing up certain native children at home, it has become a question in my own mind how far I should confer a service in recommending the 3rd child. And so the 3rd child, actually, he doesn't recommend. The 3rd child remains in India. And the other 2, because they can pass for Europeans, they go to England. And I guess they assimilate there. And one thing I discovered doing a lot of this research is it seems like there was actually a lot of gene flow that went from India to England. And like modern people have gotten DNA tests and found out that they're actually significant Indian ancestry, but I'll come back to that. So Anglo-Indians, though, regardless of how they look, were closely affiliated with England. And for the most part, they were accepted by the East India Company as English people, whether they looked it or not, up until 1791. And after that, they began to discriminate against them. In 1791, they exclude Anglo-Indians from positions of authority in civil, military, and marine services. The East India Company does that. And then in the 1830s and 40s, the mixed marriages start to decline. And under the British Raj, it's actively discouraged by the English government. So during the Indian Rebellion, also of 1857, which I mentioned earlier, the Anglo-Indians overwhelmingly side with England. So England begins to favor them for government postings over normal Indians. And that's the English government, whereas the East India Company, they had excluded them from positions. Of course, they're still like trying to discourage marriage and such, but they're using these people as administrators and go-betweens between the English government and the Indian population at large. And actually, I don't want to say something that's wrong, but I believe that the judge that sentenced Bal Gangadhar Tilak to prison for saying the wrong things was actually an Anglo-Indian, the guy that sentenced him to prison. And of course, when he's in prison, he starts working on his Hyperborea, his Hyperborea theories, the book that we talked about before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of interesting overlap in history there. And Anglo-Indians, they get jobs, a lot of jobs in the railway service and with postal and telegraph services and customs. So these guys are kind of middle administrators for the English government there. After 1858, the English government begins to strictly regulate marriage in general for the English soldiers and officers that are put over in India. And they expect the English rulers to keep a distance from the Indian subjects. They don't want them, like, I guess, being too close to the native people. And so they discourage the marriage as well. In 1876, oh wait, sorry, I skipped something here. In 1869, the Suez Canal opens up, which makes it much easier and quicker to travel from England to India. And as a result, there's a lot more English women that are going. So there's less need of the English soldiers to marry with Indian women anyways. And then although I would probably still do it, if I was over there, but 1876, the All India Anglo-Indian Association is founded by Frank Anthony. And the purpose of that organization is to advocate for the Anglo-Indian community. First, it's going to be the English that they're dealing with. And then after India gets its independence, they are advocating on behalf of Anglo-Indians with the Indian government. So first they're dealing with the English, then they're dealing with the independent government of India. Of course, India gets its independence in 1947. Like after World War II, it just wasn't really possible for the English to continue to hold on to India. And so there's something interesting that happens. The Anglo-Indians, they're given 2 seats in the Lok Sabha by default. And the Lok Sabha is the Indian parliament for the whole country. So by default, the Anglo-Indians get 2 seats. And those individuals are nominated by the President of India. And this comes from Article 331 of their constitution. And the reason they do this is because India, has lots of different ethnic groups in it, and most of the languages that they speak are not mutually intelligible. But they all have representation, or at least most of them have representation in the government. All the big ones will, because they correspond to particular states, right? So there's always going to be some Tamils there because Tamil Nadu is a state. But the Anglo-Indians have no state. They're mostly just an urban population that lives in a few places. So there's absolutely almost completely impossible for them to get a representative by way of election because they don't correspond to any region. They're not a majority anywhere. So at the state level, the state governors are authorized, but I don't think they're required, but they're authorized to appoint one Anglo-Indian to the lower house of their state legislature. And at the time that India gets its independence, there are about 1 million Anglo-Indians in India. Today, however, the estimated number is between 125,000 to 150,000, and most of them are living either in Kolkata or Chennai. And the reason why there's...
It's not a lot, right?
No, it's not. Yeah.
If you know, how many Indians are there?
I think over 1 billion.
Over 1 billion, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. It was very... Yeah. There's not a lot. And the reason for that is because after India gets its independence, they start to bail.
1.4 billion.
They go... what's 1.4 million?
1.4 billion, almost.
A billion,
people in India. Yeah.
Yeah, India's a very crowded place. Actually, though, I think the population density is about the same as it is in your country, but of course their country is much, much bigger, and it's all full of people, very much so.
Yeah.
Even at night, like you go out on the roof of your house at midnight in one of the smaller towns, or at least where I was, there's like lots and lots of people out just going this way, that way at all times. So,
yeah, not over here in my small town. People will be sleeping because they got to get up early and work.
Yeah.
But yeah,
different culture, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean they're not as driven by a clock as the Netherlands is.
Yeah, and plus it gets dark here much earlier, typically in the winter time. So yeah.
It also doesn't get cold over there for the most part either, too. So
yeah.
But yeah, basically, when India, the Anglo-Indians were overwhelmingly loyal to the English, even in cases where the English would look down on them. They still identified culturally with England. So when India gets its independence, a lot of them decide it's time to go. And they bail to other English colonies like Australia and New Zealand, Canada, England, and some even come to the United States. And of those who remained, they still continue to trickle out, mostly with preferences of going to other English-speaking cultures, so countries. So the immigration is a continual trickle, and eventually they probably will go extinct entirely. So like by the laws of, I said my wife is an Anglo-Indian, but by the laws of India, our kids could never be considered or counted as Anglo-Indians because they'd no longer have the descent from their male line. Like they're no longer descended from the English colonials by their male line. So the government doesn't really recognize, the female side. You got to have that English last name or that name, that European last name that came over with the English.
Yeah.
So every time they marry out into another community, an Anglo-Indian man, he could marry anybody. Like a normal Indian woman, kids are still counted as Anglo-Indian. Anglo-Indian woman does it, kids are not counted. You don't get to register as that ethnic group. So,
unless they have some kind of strong cultural traditions that keep them from marrying out.
which they don't, because
which they don't. Yeah, then
yeah,
or religious reasons or something like that. Then that's how typically how smaller minorities survive, like the Jews, for example. But otherwise, they'll just get absorbed into the sea of peoples.
yeah. So that's what's happening, and the fact that they're continually leaving, and that a lot of them want to leave. So
I guess you're partly to blame there, because
I'm partly to blame. Yeah,
yeah.
I guess. But what I want to do now, briefly, is talk about some famous Anglo-Indians and then some less famous Anglo-Indians. And this is for cultural, to kind of give a feel for this culture. So I want to mention some celebrities. Some of these guys you may have heard of, maybe not. Have you heard of Boris Karloff before?
Does he have anything to do with soccer or?
Boris Karloff, he's an actor.
Oh no, okay.
Oh, you haven't heard of Boris Karloff?
No, but I don't keep up with stuff like that at all. So
No, this guy's dead. He died before we were born. He's the guy that played the original Frankenstein.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used to think that he was Slavic because of his name, but actually he's an Anglo-Indian. His name was William Henry Pratt. His father was an Anglo-Indian, and then his mother was mostly English, but with some Indian descent. And this guy is famous. He's done a lot of movies, and actually
I don't think I've ever seen the original Frankenstein.
a lot of his movies are on YouTube. You can watch. And even when he was old, like he lived up until into the color era, and he was still doing movies as an old guy. Most of his movies are like horror, some like sci-fi and fantasy horror too. He did the original Mummy. You know the Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser?
Yeah.
Turns out that was a knockoff.
Oh, really?
Yes. The original movie was with Boris Karloff. It was done long time ago. And he was the Mummy, Imhotep.
Maybe you could include a link to one of his videos on YouTube.
Yeah, that's my intention. I'm going to, and I might also try to include it inside of some clips at the end of this video, assuming that it doesn't cause a problem for us. And then the next person, I'm sure you haven't heard of this one. Her name is Merle OBrien. Have you heard of her before?
It sounds familiar, but please continue.
She was born Estelle Merle O'Brien Thompson in Bombay, which today we call Mumbai, in 1911. And she's of mixed Welsh and Sri Lankan ancestry. And one thing about her that's kind of weird is she gave birth to her when she was only 12. 12-year-old girl had a baby. And so Merle, she was raised by her grandmother because her actual mother was too immature, and they were raised as sisters, which is kind of strange. And she starts to accumulate some fame in Mumbai, performing there, I guess, at local shows and stuff. And then when she's 17 years old, she bails and goes to England. And she becomes a famous actress. And she actually was in a lot of American movies, Hollywood movies. And what she did is she told everybody that she was fully European. She just LARPed as full European, and people actually believed her. I'll include pictures of her in the slideshow. To me, she doesn't look like she's fully European. But she said that she claimed that she was Australian, that she was born there. And the truth didn't come out until she was like 60 something. And then she died a little bit later. So the movies, her movies are also, quite a few of her movies are also on YouTube. You can watch to completion. But for the most part, they're not really like the kind of stuff that we would like. It looks like it's mostly drama and girly stuff. But
okay.
Yeah, your wife might like it. You can recommend to her. Or you can try to watch yourself. Like I
like drama.
Really? There's one movie she did that was like a World War II drama. It was kind of cool. Maybe
All right.
might be cool. I should say might be. I just watched a little bit of it where like the German guy was kind of where are you? You know. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, Vivien Leigh is another one. She was mostly English, but she has some Anglo-Indian ancestry as well, and she's famous for Gone with the Wind. So that's and her natural way of speaking is like with an English accent, but of course she fakes a Southern accent for that movie. And then the last guy that I have here, Alistair McGowan. Have you heard of that guy before?
That sounds very, very famous. Yeah, familiar.
Yeah, apparently he's pretty famous over in England, where he's a writer, actor, and producer, and he does impersonations. Um, and it turns out that his father was an Anglo-Indian born in Calcutta, but he immigrated to England and kept the truth from his son, who didn't find out until 2007. I think there was like a DNA test or something that was done on some TV show. But I got this quote from Alistair. He says, "Throughout my life, I had asked him why the family was in India. Where were his parents Indian? Did he speak Urdu? Did he have an elephant? He always told me simply, we were an English family who happened to be living in India." So he kind of tried to sweep it under the rug, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, that guy, he still meets the qualification for Anglo-Indian, even though he's mostly English, because it comes through his father. So if he goes to India, he could be recognized as the minority there for whatever it's worth. And the last thing I want to do, I know this is getting a little bit long, but people will appreciate this, I think. I want to read some anecdotes from some Anglo-Indians who left India because I think it sheds an interesting light on their culture. So these two people, they immigrated to New Zealand. That was their place of choice. So the first one, her name is Blossom Greig, and she was actually born in Pakistan, but she's an Anglo-Indian because I guess her family was created, before the partition of the two countries. So let's see here. Okay. Blossom was born in Karachi in 1961, and in 1994, she and Alistair, her New Zealand husband of 2 weeks, flew to New Zealand to settle. She says initially she had not wanted to make the move to New Zealand. It was hard because it meant leaving everything that I was familiar with, my family, my job, just everything. She says she made the move so that she and Alistair could be together, but adds that as a Christian growing up in a Muslim country, it was actually getting harder and harder. Blossom says she found New Zealand different to any country in its acceptance of her, and she didn't feel any real culture shock moving here. The Anglo-Indians have their own culture, which is very similar to the New Zealand culture. The only thing that we share with the locals in Pakistan is probably the food. She said the only shock was the cold winters and Christchurch's easterly wind. Yeah, and I won't read the whole thing, but basically she goes on to talk about like she's glad that she got away from Pakistan because Pakistan is going downhill. And so the other person is
Understatement.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put links to their testimonies for people who want to see the full thing. And there's some other testimonies on this website. I guess there's some Anglo-Indian organization in New Zealand. There's actually an Anglo-Indian organization in Australia as well. So it's kind of interesting. Christine Atkinson was born in Dehradun in northern India, and then she moved with her family to Mussoorie, a hill station town high on a ridge in the foothills of the Himalayas, with its vistas of a distant, always snow-capped mountain range. By the late 1940s, partition had left its terrible scars, and Indian independence engendered a sense of insecurity for many Anglo-Indians. And of course, we know, as earlier, because they were all sympathetic towards the English, or not all probably, but like 99.999%. So Christine's young parents responded to this by applying to migrate, as so many Anglo-Indians did at the time. For Christine's family, New Zealand was the destination they sought, although the rest of their family had previously migrated to the UK. The family arrived in Auckland by ship in March 1949. Christine was 4 years old, the second daughter of the family. Her sister Margaret was 8 years old, and her mother was expecting their third child, Andrew. In India, the family had enjoyed a refined, English-influenced lifestyle. Christine recalls the culture shock the family experienced on arriving in New Zealand, where they initially stayed in boarding houses until her father found work. All they could get to eat was baked beans or spaghetti on toast at a local dairy. Mom used to cry. It was just too much for her, really, and Dad was trying to cope with us and cope with Mom being so upset. Christine's father was a teacher who had taught in prestigious English medium schools in India, and soon after arriving in Auckland, secured a teaching job, which meant the family could move out of the boarding houses and into a place of their own. Christine's mother gave birth to a fourth baby, Paul, in 1952. And again, I'm not going to read her whole story, but she goes on to say that on the census forms, she puts down that she's European. But most of the people in New Zealand, they think she's Maori or they think she's Indian. And so she doesn't really consider herself Indian, so she puts European. Kind of interesting. And she actually does look very Indian, or at least in this picture she does. So the thing that kind of was interesting to me is, well, first of all, I'll say, her father was a teacher. And in India, this actually work that a lot of Anglo-Indians will still do, because English is the official language of India. And they have English immersion schools over there, and Anglo-Indians will get involved in that. My wife was actually a teacher at one of those schools before we got married. And the thing that stuck out at me about both of these testimonies, I don't know if you saw it or not, but the food. They both had an issue with the difference of food, or they both commented about the difference of food after moving to New Zealand. And that's one of the things that, like, my wife also had a hard time adjusting to, was the difference in food when she came here, because they do eat the same kind of stuff that everybody else in India eats. And I guess shifting to a new country where you suddenly can't get, not only is the food have less flavor, but you also can't get the ingredients that you need, everything that you need. It could be hard for some people. So, but anyways, that's all I got. I know it's kind of long, but we did go a while without posting anything. So I took the liberty of adding more to this topic. But you got anything that you want to add, or?
No, learned a lot of new things today. So appreciate it. Thanks for the
Yeah,
story. I hope your wife appreciates it as well.
I'm sure she will. I wanted to bring her in on this video so she could offer her comments, but it's not really possible. Somebody's got to watch the kids while I do this. So, but yeah, it turns out that my wife is actually related to Frankenstein, which is kind of interesting. So I'll let her know that in this video.
Yeah,
So
that's
like
cool.
Imhotep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. And yeah, people, please like and subscribe. And we appreciate it. We're just doing it for the fun of it. We're not getting paid or anything. So we appreciate all the support. And other than that, I think look forward to seeing you in the next one.
There's one thing just as a announcement I've got to say. We have been getting some pretty good responses from people and requests, and I would just say that if you have a request, post it on our most recent video, whatever that is, because that's where we're most likely to see it.
Yep, I agree.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Ivor.
Imhotep. This is the place of embalmment. It is not lawful for me, a priestess of Isis, to see or touch an unclean thing.
Come to the altar of Anubis, the guide of the dead. The time has come for the final prayer.
What have I to do with Anubis?
The ancient rites must be performed over thy body. And then I will read the great spell with which Isis brought Osiris back from the grave. And thou shalt rise again.
No. No, I'm alive. I'm young. I won't die. I loved you once, but now you belong with the dead. I am Anxanaman, but I'm somebody else too. I want to live, even in this strange new world.
For thy sake I was buried alive. I ask of thee only a moment of agony. Only so can we be united.
The wrath of nature. You shall not plunge my body into that.
Let the deed be done.
Let me go! Let me go! Don't kill me! I'm a priestess of Isis. Save me from that mummy. It's dead. Save me!
Scarlet Pimpernel is working to save us.
The matter of the Scarlet Pimpernel has become a national menace.
Are you the Scarlet Pimpernel?
Do you think Andrew Ffoulkes might be the Scarlet Pimpernel?
The Pimpernel is under this roof at this moment, among your friends.
They seek him here. They seek him there. Those Frenchies seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven? Is he in hell? That damned elusive Pimpernel.
Always away on some pretext or other. I'm always alone.
Good gad, my dear. How you could be unhappy, I can't imagine.
Can't you? Percy, can't you?
No, cursed if I can. Why, you're the most courted woman in London.
By whom?
By everybody.
Except you.
Tell me, my dear, I'm your husband.